problem. I'm going to start this recording for hardware and networking, network troubleshooting. So we mainly want to be able to identify the common hardware issues that we have and network issues that users may experience. Describe how to likely resolve those actual common issues. We've stated several of them. Can somebody tell me what might be some common hardware issues they may have? Hello?
Not booting up.
Right, not booting up, freezing, rebooting on them several times. We can go on and on. Hopefully depending on the issues. Next slide, guys. We'll go to this one. The computers, obviously, as we stated, are complicated. And they obviously, if we're not persistent, can be overwhelming when we're troubleshooting something that's very hard for us. We know some of our basics in reference to troubleshooting, and we should know those steps by heart so that we don't take and get lost in transition. Because when we get into these difficult situations, we want to make sure that we come out on the other end. I know we're going to be frustrated, but we want to either, I think it was Pablo that stated before, reach out to those other resources. If we can't find it online, there might be somebody internal that can obviously have experienced the same situation or something that is similar to be able to finish out at the end. Obviously, the experience may be very difficult at first, but the more repetitive we are in doing these things, usually our brain gets those pathways in, and we're ready to reach to those different resources. Be for networking, I know who to go to. Telecom, now I got this guy. Versus at first, you were just at grasp everywhere. At one point, you become what we say, that little Jedi master, that it's not so much what you know, is who you know that can be able to resolve the issue internally. Because sometimes, even though you know how to fix it, you need to reach out to other people to be able to resolve the issue. Any questions or doubts? I'm not going to read word for word here, because if not, we could just. Any questions or doubts? Let's go on to the next one. Categories of common issues. We have storage, video systems, printers, wired and wireless networks. Can somebody give me an example of, Pablo, can you give me an example of printer issues that a user may have?
Either like an issue with the ribbon, or like a paper jam, or the color is not coming out properly.
Okay. And depending on the issue and our knowledge in these different, we can then tackle it easily exactly to the source. Because some of the problems we may have on a laser printer, for instance, we said that if the ink is still loose when I finish, what can that be? What would create that the paper has it, but as soon as I lift it or go like this to the paper, the ink gets smudged or it completely comes off? What would be a problem on a laser printer? Anyone?
Bad fuser.
Right? Because it's not fusing it onto the paper. So these are some of the common issues that we have here, the main ones. So be prepared, obviously, to try to troubleshoot these issues, because they come very frequently, which is your storage, your video systems, your printers, wired and wireless networks. Next slide, 6. Daniel, can you help us with this slide, please?
Hard drives. Hard drive system problems usually stem from one of the following 3 causes. The adapter, the SATA, PATA, or other interference is bad. The disk is bad or failing. The adapter and disk are connected incorrectly. The first and last causes are easy to identify because in either case, the symptom will be obvious. The drive won't work. You won't be able to get the computer to communicate with the disk drive. The way to see which component is at fault is to disconnect and reconnect, or to try the device in another system, or to try another device drive in the affected system. However, if a problem is a bad or failing disk drive, the symptoms aren't always as obvious. Diego, you're muted.
Okay, dokie. Try that now. Technical difficulty there. All right. Any questions so far in reference to the SATA PATA adapter? Do you guys understand what's a SATA PATA adapter? Pablo.
So that's
Mhm.
the serial technology attachment. So that's pretty much to like power for like the power supply, or connecting the power supply to like different drives and stuff like that.
Okay, I agree with the drive part, but is it the power cord?
No, not in itself. Like it'll be a peripheral, and
Okay.
that's what,
That's the cable that I will use for an IDE drive. The SATA would be just a regular one, and the PATA we said was the 40 versus the 80, where if you had a slave drive, you can use the PATA to be able to create that, right? I don't know if you guys remember that one.
yeah.
All right. So there's a 40 pin and then there's the 80 pin one. And that allows you to create that. Obviously, those are special cables and they should be connected a certain way. And it usually is marked on the motherboard if it's capable of doing that. Usually nowadays, we're not running into these things because a lot of people are not using IDE, right? What are we using now? What's the latest port that we're using?
SATA.
It's SATA? Is it called SATA? Is it?
I thought it was like M2.
That's what I was thinking.
So yeah, it's SATA and the other one is the, which was equivalent to that, but it's outside. Which one is the same as saying SATA, but it would be outside.
External SATA?
Thank you. Come on, guys. I'm not trying to trick you here.
Okay, so just the eSATA.
eSATA, yeah, that's what it's called. Yeah, just make sure you guys recognize these, because if they give you a choice between a SATA and an eSATA, you gotta know what it is, right? An IDE. We said that PATA cable is used on the IDE, right?
And the PATA cable was either the 40 pin or the 80 pin?
Where is the PATA cable?
Right. What about the 80 pin one? That's just bigger, but it's still PATA cable.
Here's the 40, and then it has like a 80 on the other side. So the ribbon itself is, instead of being 40, it's 80. Exact same connector on the sides, see? Then over here is the one that goes, I believe, to the motherboard. They make it different colors so you know exactly which way it goes where. But the cable itself at one point has 80. Still has an IDE connector on it. PATA cable. Then you have the ATA. That's the regular ATA. Question? They all have, obviously, those have ID there. Although it's so many wires inside, the pins is still coming up to the motherboard at 40. We learned that obviously those cables, when we're using them though, we need to be able to put it on the actual back of the drive, which one's the master and which one's the slave, based on the jumpers, to be able for it to understand how to use the connector. If not, it won't be able to do it. Any questions or doubts on this slide overall, the SATA, PATA, or disk bad failing? All right, next slide. So loud clicking or scratching noises are pretty obvious. You'll hear a click, 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 click. It's any HDD drive will make that noise. Would I hear that noise, Christina, though, on an SSD drive?
No.
So if I have SSD drives and I start hearing a noise that's clicking, what could it be, Jordan? I have an SSD drive, but I still hear a clicking noise inside the computer. What could be a clicking noise inside the computer?
Something with the optical drive, maybe, or a fan.
There we go, right? Optical drive or fan would be acceptable. Something else is obviously making the noise. We need to be able to identify exactly what it is. It could be the fan on the PSU. It could be the fan on the actual, the CPU or the GPU. If you don't clean it right and maintain it, it'll get, start making some weird noises in there. It could be something's kind of stuck and it's making that little bicycle noise when you have anybody ever put baseball cards in their bicycle back in the days and make that little noise? So that's probably might be something that's in there making that noise, or dust accumulation or something. Obviously, if it's really loud clicking noise, turning it off and looking inside and unplugging everything was well recommended. Any questions in reference to scratching or loud clicking? So slow performance or read-write failures. Overall, these are a little bit difficult to understand. So one thing we need to make sure is that we go and look at if is it full, is the actual hard drive being pounded? Is there a way that I can actually verify if it is being pounded? Anybody understand what I mean by, or used? Let me rephrase the question. Before I assume it's the hard drive, how can I figure out that if it is the hard drive overall?
You can do a few tests. There are some diagnostic tools as well. One quick thing I would do is just transfer a file to see how it goes. If it fails, that's a sign that I may have to check the disk partition and then see which sectors may be having issues. I know that there's a function in Windows, I think it's called defrag, so you can actually check to see how bad it is. And there's even some diagnostic third-party tools you can use.
Okay, all of them checked out fine. Your defrag is beautiful. And what can be causing an issue now? Where can I go? Still, somehow, it's slow performance, read-write issue, failure. What could create something weird and corrupt files?
Well, then at that point, I would probably have to check the external, not opening the hard disk, not opening at all, just looking at it physically, see if anything looks odd. That's one thing I would do. And second, I'll see if I can run it outside the case to see if I can hear any weird noises, to see if there's any hardware
But this was
failure.
not noises. This is slow performance, read-write issues only. Let's not concentrate on, we're only going on slow performance. I'm already telling you the tools checked out fine. You went and downloaded the latest, greatest tools that can check that hard drive. That hard drive, it says it's in tip-top shape. You're still getting slow performance, read-write issues.
I guess there's too much data on the disk. That's another thing I can think of.
It's not full. You compressed everything. You're still having issues. I'm gonna tease you guys because you guys gotta know this one. Come on, man. What could actually create something that goes so slow and it corrupts a file, and it's not the hard drive?
An overflow?
Malware, thank you. Malware is the only other issue that you could have on this. You need to go and see what's going on, because something is messing up. Obviously, your antivirus is not catching on. Everything is telling you that it's fine with the hard drive. So I would obviously check the task manager, see if the hard drive is getting pounded by some certain application, and see what that application is. It could be that it's even one of those Windows downloads that is going on. So we need to exactly find out, is it malware? Is it some sort of update, something that got stuck somewhere? We need to see where the resource of this drive is being used. Maybe it's not even the drive itself. Maybe it's memory that's corrupt. So when it's trying to sync or something, it's just creating issues. So we need to be able to dig in deep, and persistence is the only way out of this, right? Make sure that we're able to find out. If we can't pinpoint the issue and everything's told us it's not that, the only thing that's left, although it may not sound obvious, must be the answer. Was that Spock or Einstein? I can't remember. You guys tell me later. Boot problems. So boot problems, obviously, it can be complicated. It can be issues with the BIOS itself, recognizing the drive, or the OS itself might have gotten corrupt, as we stated, by some sort of malware. So we need to be able to decipher. There's some things that we can do to be able to fix if it is an MBR issue. Master boot record could be a little bit messed up. There is some bootable media that allows us to actually recover the MBR itself and fix it. Any questions and or doubts on this slide in reference to boot problems, slow performance, or loud click? Next slide. Smart. Christina, can you help me out here with this slide?
Self-monitoring analysis and reporting technology. Software installed on them. Smart monitors hard drive reliability and theoretically can warn you in the event of an imminent failure. The idea behind Smart is great. Who wouldn't want to know when their drive was going to fail so they could back up the drive? In practice, though, it seems to help manufacturers locate persistent issues by identifying hard drive design flaws more than it helps end users avoid catastrophic data losses. Helping hard drive manufacturers do a better job isn't a bad thing, but Smart hasn't enjoyed widespread commercial success with end users. This can largely be attributed to the following three factors. 1. Windows OS don't come with a built-in graphical utility to parse the data. 2. The 70 metrics provided by the Smart aren't always easy to understand, and there has been little guidance as to which metric or metrics are most closely associated with impending drive failure. 3. Manufacturers have not consistently defined the metrics among themselves. There are no industry-wide analysis applications or standards for this technology.
Thank you. Smart isn't that smart, unfortunately. It is in the aspect, but it hasn't been really driven by any vendor and or Windows itself. So there's no built-in, as they said, GUI interface that allows you to see this information with ease, to understand that. Usually you need some type of third-party software, I believe, to be able to get something out of that. Let's go into the next one, which is the next slide is in reference to RAID arrays. As we know, if we're using redundant array of independent disks, this usually gives us some sort of line of defense. What type of defense do I have, guys, for my RAIDs? What's the defense that I have? Which ones are available that does have some type of redundancy?
Hive is one.
5 has some type of redundancy, right?
Hmm.
Okay.
10. Or 1 plus 0.
How many disks can I lose on RAID 5?
1.
That's correct. One before the array becomes completely useless after that. We have to try to replace it before any other drive goes bad. What other one gives me redundancy? Some sort of redundancy.
1. RAID 1.
Uh-huh. And that's called what?
Mirroring.
All right. So it gives me identical copy. How many do I get there? How many drives can I lose?
1.
One drive, right? Only one, right? All right. And it's always in pairs, right? This one requires always in pairs, while RAID 5 does not. It requires a minimum of 3 drives, right? What's another one that's out there that I can use for redundancy? There's 2 more out there that we've learned.
RAID 10.
RAID 10, and RAID 0+1. We just need to know which is which in reference to if it's first striping with redundancy or if it's redundancy with striping. That's the only variance between 0+1 and RAID 10.
What is it again?
We have RAID 0+1, which is striping in the inside with mirroring on the external or on the upper.
Backwards. Okay, got it.
And then RAID 10 is striping in the inside or on the lower side of the tree with, no, I'm sorry, mirroring in the inside with striping on the top. Yeah, 0+1. 0 is first striping and then 1 mirroring on the top, and then 1+0 is mirroring and then striping on the top. So that would be 1, 1, and then we'll go to a 0 up here, right? And it goes over here, and this would be 2 and 2, and that would be 1, 0. That's 10. Versus 0+1, it would have 1 over here, 2 over there, right? That's 0. It comes up. And it has 1 here and 2 here. That's 1. It's doing the mirror up there. Horrible too. Question? All right. So, if your RAID array is not found or stops working, obviously, depending if it's software based or if it's hardware based, there's different ways of doing it. If only one disk has failed, usually your whole system is not down, as we stated. Unless if it's striping, then you're pretty much up the proverbial hill. Usually you won't put RAID 0 on operating system. That's not obviously very helpful. RAID 0 will be maybe on the performance of an application portion where you're doing your hosting on the server, some type of gaming and stuff. So that portion of it where all of that information is being written back and forth is being striped versus the actual application where it's installed and where the OS is installed, that would be on a mirrored RAID. You guys do realize you could have several RAIDs inside one server, right? The server is not required to have just one RAID. You decide how is it you want to set it up. Some of these servers have 15 drives. So you choose your flavor of RAID depending on your use. Any questions so far? As we stated, we have no point of failure here. So if something happens here, we're pretty much the whole thing fails. RAID 1 is disk mirroring. It increases obviously a little bit your tolerance to 1. Obviously after that, you need to be able to replace that one drive. If not, you will lose everything if that next drive goes down. RAID 5, that one is the one with the parity check, right? We said that it actually just loses an nth of a drive. In other words, if I have 6 drive, I only lose 1/6 of my data. We all agree that all of the drives are exact same size when it comes to RAID, because it needs to be for mirroring or RAID 5 or any of the other ones that are out there, it requires a certain amount of space, right? So in this one is an nth of a drive that you lose. You still have only 1 point of failure here. If you lose another drive, you're pretty much, again, unfortunately, in the what they call the peripheral hill there, right? RAID 1+0 is mirrored with striped. As long as one drive in each mirrored is the one that's affected, you're still down. So technically you could have up to 2. Your odds are against you, obviously, because you're flipping up a coin there, that second drive that contains the exact duplicate does not go down. But we do understand that it is a minimum of 4 drives. Since there is 4 drives and there's 1 here, right? And 2 there, right? When I have my mirror here with the stripe on the top, if this guy goes down, I'm still okay. If this guy goes down, I'm still okay. But if this guy happened to be the second one down, then I'm down. Your odds are against you at that point. You just got to be hoping that the drive that went down, that whoever's in that mirror set doesn't go down with him. So it's not a perfect 2-drive system there. Don't get the false illusion that you could actually lose 2 of any of them. Not that you could lose any 2. It must be 2 from the different mirrors. Any questions, doubts? Next slide. Optical drives. Jordan.
Optical drives. Optical drive, CD-ROM, DVD, and Blu-ray. Problems are normally media related. Although compact disc technology is pretty reliable, it's not perfect. One factor to consider is the cleanliness of the disc. On many occasions, if a disc is unreadable, cleaning it with an improved cleaner and a lint-free cleaning towel will fix the problem. If the operating system does not see the drive, start troubleshooting by determining whether the drive is receiving power. If the tray will eject, you can assume the drive has power. Next, check BIOS setup, SATA or PATA drives, to make sure that the drive has been detected. If not, check the master-slave jumper on the drive, and make sure the PATA adapter sets auto, CD-ROM or ATAPI in BIOS setup. Once inside the case, ensure that both the drive and the motherboard ends are securely connected and, on a PATA drive, that the ribbon cable is properly aligned. With pin 1, the edge that has the red or pink stripe being closest to the power connector. If an optical drive works normally but doesn't perform a special capability, for example, it won't burn disks, the problem is likely the software.
Okay, thank you. Any questions in reference to optical drives? Pretty self-explanatory. Next slide. Video issues. Daniel.
Video issues. Troubleshooting video problems is usually fairly straightforward because there are a limited number of issues that you might face. You can sum up nearly all video problems with 2 simple statements. There is either no video or bad video. Either the video call or the monitor projector display is to blame. In the vast majority of classes, when you have a video problem on a desktop computer, a troubleshooting step is to check the monitor by transferring the video to another machine that you know is working. See if it works there. If the problem persists, you know it's the monitor. If it goes away, you know it's the video card. or possibly the driver? Is the video card seated properly? Is the newest driver installed?
Thank you. So yeah, so we have various other issues that we have. We've stated no image on the screen, the monitor turns off and on, dead pixels, incorrect colors, flickering, distorted images. Obviously, there's a plethora of issues that are out there. Let's go to the next slide. Overall, no image on the screen. Troubleshooting usually on this one is pretty easy. Obviously, try another monitor and or check maybe the input. If you have various input, it could be that it is on, but it's not on the right input. Remember, if it's not the actual monitor, you've been able to rule that out. If you ruled out all choices and there's only one left out, then that obviously is the only choice. At that point, you got to go towards the video card or the motherboard and see if that's the issue. We got to maybe try the monitor instead of another computer. If it turns on, then we got to go towards the next layer. If it is a laptop, sometimes they flicker with a little function button. That might help us out, or review within the BIOS itself to see if somebody has changed something in there. If it goes into BIOS, that is the least intrusive way to test your actual monitor, because it's not using the OS at that point, and it's using only VGA colors to able to display something. Usually though, if we're having problems though, can somebody tell me if it really can't show anything, what else would the motherboard do to try to give me some sense of what's going on? Let's say it's not booting up at all.
Start beeping?
Yes, thank you. Exactly. So if it's not booting up at all and it's not giving me an image, it's going to start beeping. We got to write down how many beeps and what exactly is the model that we're working with so that we can look it up. The monitor that keeps shutting down, it could be its own internal power supply. It could be that it's overheating. Check and make sure that it has ventilation around there. A lot of the times users like to put a whole bunch of Post-it notes and believe it or not, on the holes and everything where it's trying to breathe. Some of these monitors that are out there have its own little breathing area to breathe in, and they kind of clog up those things. So check those, make sure that they're not clogging them up. Make sure if the problem persists and there's no way you can resolve it, we're not gonna go and open up these units. If anything, if it push comes to shove and we test with a brand new CRT of the same model and it doesn't keep on doing the exact same thing to the user, then obviously we can order them a brand new monitor through procurement if necessary. Any questions so far? Next slide. Dead pixels or artifacts. Obviously, dead pixels, we know exactly what they are. They're usually a dead spot, we said earlier, right? It's not firing up or turning on anymore, so it's going to be black. No matter what you put, you're going to see that little black square. Check, obviously, that it's not the user himself that's created some dumb little thing on there, but obviously if they're showing a video and you see there, it can be that it is either burned in, or sometimes, believe it or not, I've found people eating. So what they believe to be a dead pixel was actually a food particle. I don't know what to tell you, right, bro? People do the darndest things around computers. So make sure, obviously, when you get there, because usually when you're in a help desk, you're hearing what they're telling you. You can't see. Even if I net op or if I remote desktop into this, I can't see really their dead pixel, can I? I need to confirm exactly what it is before we actually replace the unit. Inverted colors or incorrect colors can be actual issues either with drivers or the user itself might have done something to the monitor to change the colors itself, because sometimes some of these things have the settings for myopia, or not myopia, I don't know what it's called, whatever it is, that you're colorblind. There's like 3 different things, so make sure it's not that they've actually went and messed up something in there before, obviously, we report the issue of being the monitor to be switched out. Flickering images on the LCD. These issues are commonly, obviously, of the backlight. We already mentioned that. We might need to replace the backlight, but that usually doesn't happen in the help desk environment, depending on the company. Obviously, if you're in a small mom and pop, you may be required to replace the backlight, but that's not very common. Distorted images, this is obviously CRT monitor itself could be having problems with a magnetic field around it. Sometimes it could be the image itself, or maybe there is some type of magnetic interference within the area. So we need to make sure it's not that before we can obviously eliminate anything else, which could be internally the monitor or the video card that's creating the problem. Any questions on this slide? Doubts? All right, next slide. Where distorted geometry, obviously the old monitors were more squarish, had the 4.4 by 3 ratio, aspect ratio, compared to now where we have the 16 by 9 or 16 by 10. Depending on your setup and the geometry, sometimes these users also do multiple screens. So if they actually duplicate or they try to stretch it out a certain way, they might create a problem. So we want to make sure that inside Windows, we check everything in their settings, make sure that they went in here, and when they went into their display settings itself, that they did select, for instance, here's the monitor that I have up here versus the monitor that I have down here. I can put it over here and I can change it so it could be the exact same size. We need to confirm what exactly is going on and what aspect ratio the user has created back there before we try to replace any issues. The same thing, as though I fixed here a certain aspect ratio within my OS, I guess I wish I could show you guys, but sometimes this screen here on my television, although it's okay on the OS, I have to come back and go over here and start changing the aspect ratio to go to screen fit, because it kind of like puts the squarish geometry that they're talking about here. So I can't see my start button, I can't see the time, and I can't see the close button, and I can't see anything on the, you guys might be able to see everything when I'm sharing my screen, but I lose all that area. So sometimes it's the monitor itself that's creating that problem, and it's not the OS. We need to be able to check vice versa, which one's creating the issue with the resolution. Oversized icon images, also check and make sure that the oversized icons and or images is not the user himself. Sometimes they don't know this, but the OS allows you to shrink with your mouse. You have a little roller mouse, I think it's control and the up and down on the roller mouse, and it shrinks and makes bigger the actual icons. Besides obviously going and setting it up in your settings, you could actually do that on the fly on the actual desktop. Make sure it's not related to that. Also, it could be that they lowered the settings to 800 by 600, which obviously then makes the screen very small and the icons look very huge. Other graphic issues that can be, oops, sorry, let me go put this up here. Battling. Other graphic issues can be attributed obviously to memory installed on or the GPU itself could be giving you problems. The memory modules within the actual video card can be directly creating the problem. So we need to make sure if we do have a specialized GPU or a specialized video card, rule out that video card, maybe use the one that's on the motherboard itself to see if that alleviates the problem before we go and swap it out. Or if we have a spare card, use a spare card to see if that's the issue. Any questions? Next slide. All right, we have different types of printers. As we said, we have our impact printers, inkjet printers, and laser printers. All of them give us different type of issues. Depending on the type of printer, you need to be able to identify and adapt to the given situation. So, slide 17. Impact printers are pretty much named because they rely on physical impact. So, and a dot matrix daisy wheel, if it stops moving and making that little clack, clack, clack. You could darn tootin'. It can be a problem with the actual motor itself or the hammer. Something's loose in there. If it's giving you low print quality and you still replace the ribbon, it could be the user, when they're putting in these ribbons, they have to actually release the lever to a certain spot so it loosens the ribbon, and they forget to lock it back to a certain spot. So yes, they put the ribbon in, but it's the head is not close enough. So when it's hitting, it gives you a very low printout. Paper jams can be obviously a big pain in the butt depending on what they're doing in there. As I stated, these impact printers have a little wheel with and it has little holes on the edges. And a lot of the times these manufacturers of the paper, when they punch the hole, they never take out all the little circles. So these little circles or the punches are not fully out and they start falling into the printer itself. Maintenance must be done, and obviously to be able to take it out. Another problem is that sometimes they put it too close. They have to adjust. Since I have multi-part forms, it could be that they had a thinner paper in there and they decided to put the 5-part form and failed again to adjust the width of the print head to the paper. You get to adjust that depending on the type of paper, the grade of paper you have. Questions or doubts?
Sounds like the impact printer fails often. I thought it was reliable. Or is that just because of user error?
The impact printer is a very reliable printer, as in long-term life. Obviously, with proper use, it works pretty good. But sometimes a user is not well trained, so we need to train them when it comes to these things. It could be also on low print quality that it's already, the ribbon is already old, so they need to replace it. Could be that the ribbon is new and it's actually broken. So what happens is that it's not actually spinning and going through the tape. So yes, at first it started printing dark, but then since the motor is trying to spin, but it's not really going anywhere with it, it's just riding over that same spot. So we need to make sure to identify what's the problem. Obviously, the parts are cheap here. If I go and get another ribbon, boom, I'm out. And a lot of these things come with like 5 or 10 year service if you're buying them because they're so huge. If you're buying the big ones, a lot of times you get the 5 to 10 year service with these things. If you want, obviously. I think it's 1 to 2 years, the regular. But if you're that big in printing, you usually have it where they'll send you another one, a refurbished one, without no questions asked. Here, send back the other one. If you're not able to replace the parts to fix it with what they're going to send you, they'll, with ease, just ask you to send it. Because these things are obviously huge too. The big ones. There's small impact printers, but usually we're talking about the big ones. Any questions on the low quality print jams and or step motor? You know what the step motor is? Hello?
Is that the part that actually moves the head?
The step motor is the one that moves the paper through. This guy here, he's the one that's pushing it. And so usually inside there's a motor that actually pulls the paper through. So that would be your step motor. So if it's going bad, you'll see that the spacing in between the things or the form doesn't seem to be printing out right. It's just not, it's losing precision. And the more steps that it goes through the paper, like it just doesn't, it's not printing it right. Everything's printing as in reference to the characters, but as for it being correct within the paper, there's no way of adjusting it. Remember these forms, sometimes you see how these forms here have its area. The step motor fails, you'll wind up maybe printing up here where you want down here. Or it's all just stuck together. It's not, it's not moving. Make sense? No? Yes? No? Maybe so?
Yes.
That's the guy there, and he has two pipes, one going to the other and the other side, and basically just brings it up. Next one. Impact printers. Ooh, this will test anybody's vision. So, consistent faded or light characters, as I stated before, worn, print or ribbon, usually that will fix the issue. Check, make sure it's not actual motor of the ribbon that's giving you the issue per se, versus the actual ribbon. So if I replace it and the ribbon's not winding, the first thing I need to do is take out that ribbon and wind it myself, usually with a pencil. It works out pretty decent if you put it in there. And like the old cassette tape, see if it winds. Some of them, a lot of them, have the actual little palanca there so that you could actually twist it yourself, depending on the ribbon and the make and the model. So you want to make sure if that ribbon's moving physically when you do it, and when it's in the printer it doesn't move, then there's a problem with the motor on the ribbon itself. That might be the motor that needs to be replaced. Print lines that go from dark to light as the print head moves across. That one again is pretty close to what I was saying. So now the actual gear is slipping, so it's not moving fast enough with the print head, so it starts wearing out that area because it's not moving. It's supposed to move in the rate of it going like this, and it's supposed to pull at the same time that ribbon so that it doesn't get wasted real quick. If it's not moving correctly, it will create that problem where it starts becoming light at one point. A small black line running through a line that prints consistently. Now that could be that the print head pin is stuck inside. If the print head it has a problem, that must be replaced. You're gonna always see a black line for some weird reason, no matter how much you try to do whatever it is, it's just got a line going through. These are impact printers, right? So this could be the actual, the dot matrix one. Questions so far? The same thing, next one I think is intermittently now. So it's, instead of being consistently, this time it's intermittently. It could be a broke or loose print head cable. Is another one, shortening of a print head cable. Secure or replace the actual print head cable instead of the actual print head in this time. Because another thing, the problem with these things, they move so quick. And I don't know if you guys ever seen these things. They're so loud and they just like, it'll make the table move. So I've seen some of them where it's moving it so much that it'll actually jar that little print head cable that they're talking about a little bit loose. A lot of the times they have a screw. If they're expensive enough, instead of having just the little pins or something to lock it into place, usually is screws that lock it into place, or if not, it's in by pressure, depending on the model again. A small dark line running through a line of print. The print head may be stuck, replace it, or pushing the pin away from the damaged print head may work out, but that usually is not a good thing. A dark line running through usually is the problem with the print head itself. Print head making a lot of noise, but no printing is appearing. So you hear all the usual noise like if it is printing, but it's not. A worn, missing, improper ribbon usually is the culprit. Especially when they're coming, they replace it with a new one. A lot of the times they just don't put it into the spot, as I stated. So you have the actual print head. It has a carriage. I don't know if you guys remember the old typewriters, but you have to put it into a little section, the tape, so it goes in front of the print head between the paper and the print head. So if the ribbon's not there, when it smacks, it's not going to be in the right place at the right time. Questions or doubts? If it's printing garbage, obviously it could be that the wrong driver is selected. I would strongly recommend checking that first before doing anything. A lot of users sometimes, when they're starting to have problems, they'll start messing with their drivers. So I'll have maybe a laser inkjet, another printer, and this printer and that printer. But if I go into my printer settings and I start messing with it, I can actually put that other printer's drivers onto this impact printer that I have here. So that has been common issue that the users try to resolve something and they created another issue. Obviously, if it isn't that, the only other choice could be the actual board, right? Control board itself could be the one that's being the problem. Any questions? What's the control board inside the printer?
Is that considered the motherboard of the
Yeah,
printer,
pretty much.
basically the controller?
That's the printer, yeah, pretty much. PCB. Any questions or doubts? The control board, same as the motherboard. Learned that one, if you guys recall. Inkjet printers. This one is a little bit more easier, I would say, in reference to the inkjet printers versus the impact printers. Usually it's one self-contained unit, right? Obviously, anything else that's in there, we're not going to be messing much with besides the actual cartridge, maybe the belt and or the step motor. Same here as in reference to the feeding mechanism that could create problems for you. So you may have to either replace the actual rollers or something in there that is replaceable. Those are usual maintenance parts that they're talking about. So you need to be able to resolve those type of issues. And here for the print quality, obviously the print quality is a majority of inkjet printers have a settings that you can actually put very, very low. So make sure that's not the problem before we go and rule out anything else. 99% of these though can be the actual faulty ink cartridge. So a lot of these vendors will tell you, well, guess what? You didn't buy an HP print cartridge. You went and bought it aftermarket. We're not responsible for the damages that it may cause. So we need to make sure that it is not a cheap aftermarket or a refilled. Those are usually the ones that cause problems to these things and create issues if you have that type of print cartridge. Also, I've seen where they actually have it where they forget to actually take off that little strip and they leave that on. So you need to make sure that's not a plugged hole and or something that's actually stopping it. Usually 99.999, if it is that type of problem, the print quality, replacing the print cartridge is the only solution. Or as we said, the print head and everything's inside in there, right? Color output problems, obviously, let's make sure that it's not bleeding inside there. As we said, it could be a problem with the actual cartridges that are leaking. One of the other problems could be that the ink cartridges are installed in the wrong spot. So then you get weird colors. These are usually marked with what colors? Anybody remember? What are the 3 colors that the printer usually has?
Cyan, magenta, yellow.
Cool. So we need to make sure if it is the ones that's not all 3 colors in one cartridge, we need to make sure that we put those cartridges in the right spot. A lot of these users don't care and they just put it in there and they believe that the printer somehow mysteriously knows exactly what they're talking about because obviously they're human. Any questions or doubts? Obviously, another thing that they have is that when it gets real dirty, a lot of these have their own self-cleaning setup, and some of them even come with the little cleaning pads, if necessary, that you can purchase to clean the actual units. But as we said, this cartridge contains everything inside, so when I replace it or put another one, it's just really on a carriage. Questions, doubts? Next slide. We have paper jams. In the inkjet printers, pretty much Paper jams are common, especially if the rollers is going down. If a pickup roller is going down, the same thing happens on the laser printers. A pickup roller is a roller, looks pretty weird. It's not a usually perfectly round, and if it is, it has some type of gripping with these rubber pads. The pickup roller gets old, the more paper it goes through it, it actually starts getting worn out. We see here a pickup roller for a actual printer. So with these little things have a little latch where you can actually take the latch out and pop it out of place and replace the pickup roller. This is meant for ease because it's meant to be worn out. It's something normal for you to be able to replace. We have to also make sure, is the type of grade of paper allowed to be there? Some people try to buy these fancy papers where some of these printers are not meant to pick up that type of grade of paper. The glossy and or very thick paper is not meant to be fed sometimes from the bottom. It has to be maybe manually fed on the top. The step motor is just like impact printers. A failing step motor will have the same results, uneven space lines, etc. Basically, while it's coming in the paper, the step motor will be creating that type of problem. Any questions on inkjet printers? Next slide. Laser printers. So, laser printers. Justin, help me out here.
Laser printers. The process that laser printers use to print, called the electrophotographic image process, is the most complex process of all commonly used printers. You should have already memorized the 7-step EP process for the 220 to 1001 A+ exam. The process is processing, which the page to be printed gets rendered one horizontal stripe at a time. The image is stored in memory for printing. The next step is charging. Charging, the corona gets a high voltage from the high voltage power supply. It uses the voltage to apply a strong uniform negative charge, negative 600 VCD, to a photosensitive drum. The next step is exposing. The laser scans the drum. Whenever it touches the drum, the charge is reduced from negative 600 VCD to around negative 100 VCD. The pattern formed on the drum will be the image that is printed. After that, you have developing. The developing roller acquires a negative 600 VCD charge from the HVPS and picks up the toner, which gets the same negative 600 VCD charge. As the developing toner runs over the photosensitive drum, the toner is attracted to the laser charged negative 100 VCD areas on the photosensitive drum and sticks to those areas. Then you have transferring. The charging corona wire or roll acquires a strong positive charge plus 600 VCD and transfers it to the paper. As the photosensitive drum will ink on to the roll by. This ink is attached to the paper. Then you have the fusing process. A 350-degree fuser roll melts the toner paper, and the rubberized presser roll presses the melted toner into the paper, making making the image permanent. Then lastly, you have the cleaning process. A rubber blade scrapes any remaining toner off the drum, and the fluorescent lamp discharges any remaining charge on the photosensitive drum.
Thank you. Any questions on the 7 steps? Well, depending on where the issue is, we should know what parts are the problems. So looking at all the steps involved, the laser printer makes it a little bit easier, obviously, to tell the laser printer's issue. However, the laser printer problems are identifiable and can have specific fixes. So let's discuss these right here. So power problems, obviously, the unit doesn't want to respond to power. It could be a power that is receiving from the wall. The unit itself might have actually tripped the I've seen it a lot where it trips the actual the fuse box. So you got to be careful with these units. As he stated a second ago, is using how much VDC? 600 volts. What is it coming in with? Coming with an AC 110, right? It was pulling a lot of amps to create this. Remember about the amps? We have volt and amperage. Creates wattage. So we have to be careful with these units. We could damage them or damage, obviously, vice versa. Just trip the actual, can't damage any more of the fuses. I'm thinking about the old houses. Again, saying my age, where you could actually have to replace the fuse in your house. So you don't have to do that anymore. They have the old auto ones, right? I mean, if you do damage your fuse box in your house, you've obviously got a bigger problem going on. Another thing we can do is use a multimeter to be able to verify the voltage on these. The pin 1, as they state, is 5 volts to make sure that you're using the multimeter on the right setting, because sometimes you're getting something that's not what you want. If you have on ohms, as we said, these multimeters have settings in there. So we need to make sure we put it towards volts when we're going to read, and ensure we have on pin 1 5 volts, on 5 we have -5 volts, and on pin 9 we should have 24. Any questions? A lot of these times we're not going inside these laser printers to check these things. It's usually getting sent out. If it's something internal like this and messing with anything internal, we're not meant to touch these laser printers. Usually they have some type of service agreement. Any questions or doubts so far? Now, connectivity issues, obviously, most of these things nowadays are no longer printing through parallel. A lot of these times they're on the actual network, be wireless or physical. We need to be able to verify what the issue is, if it's actually receiving an IP address, or if it was manually configured, ensure that obviously nobody went and touched something there. It could be that the cable is disconnected from the back, or somebody did some type of maintenance in the closets. We need to verify the physical connection before we rule out and replace any cards. Because some of these puppies, you can actually change the actual card if it's a physical network card. Any questions? Does anybody know which way, if I can't get to the printer, I can figure out if it doesn't have an IP or anything like that? Something about laser printer.
You said if it doesn't have an IP?
If let's say the IP address is not the IP address that I had set a specific IP address on it. That's not pingable anymore. But it looks like if it's flickering, the little light in the back of the network card is flickering. How can I tell if it does have an IP or not? If it's not pinging, right? That IP is not pinging. What can I do? A lot of these printers have a screen in the front of them with a menu to allow you to print out its settings. Oh, great. No, thank you. I'll pay full price. No, thank you. I don't even want to pull full price. I don't want to pay you anything. So within there, with these, you'll be able to just print out, and it'll print you out all its settings. You can look up the manufacturer's thing, but you'll see there, you see the little screen. You usually have some way physically to get to some type of GUI interface that allows you to print out. Any questions, doubts? And sometimes if the GUI is sophisticated enough, well, a lot of the times I haven't found one that doesn't, it allows you to actually change the IP there in the screen. Any questions or doubts? Next slide, slide 24. Nothing prints out. Here we have to rule out, is the user the only one with the problem, or are all users having the same exact problem? Is the printer online? You'll be surprised how many users go and press that beautiful button that's on there that puts it offline. So the print server itself is sending everything. So the server itself is sending everything to the printer, but it is manually offline. So it's not going to print. We need to verify exactly what the problem is. Is it an issue that is with the actual power, or is it something that the user might have done before we can rule out that and replace anything? Paper jams, this could be very frustrating. I've seen so many users, unfortunately, when it's not the worn rollers itself, right? It could be that there is other stuff that's basically lodged in their paper clips. We said staple. God only knows what food particles have gone in there. Muffins. So obviously the obvious ones is the rollers. You'll see it, as I told you, because if you see a brand new roller, it looks like some old wrinkly weird thing versus a new roller looks wrinkly old thing, while a worn out roller looks very smooth. All of it's like a tire. You guys know how you have threads on a tire kind of thing? That's what happens, is it gets so worn out that it gets very glossy or very slippery, that roller. Any questions? Okay, next slide. All right, blank pages. Somehow, somewhere, toner is being put onto the paper. Obviously, it could be the toner cartridge, the problem. If we swap it out with another one and we're still having the issues, then there can be the transfer cord or high power voltage issues. In reference to the toner cartridge itself, usually it's because of the image itself. So when the printer prints out, it may be a completely blanked page, or it could be a faded or a ghost image that's coming out. Like it just looks like if it tried to print something, but you can't see exactly the actual thing. A lot of the times, the quickest way to fix this is shaking it, because believe it or not, just like when you buy the Yoo-hoo bottles, you must shake your laser cartridges before you put them in. It says it in the instructions, shake well, because you have to shake the toner around inside the cartridge. Obviously, you're not going to make milkshake out of this thing or any scrambled eggs, but you want to be able to shake it to loosen it. Just like maybe when salt gets stuck, same concept. You're trying to make it get shake to make sure that it gets. So that's something usual that happens, and it may just restore and everything's back up and running. In reference to the transfer corona itself, it can be damaged or missing the wire. That doesn't happen a lot, where the missing wire or the transfer corona, unless if somebody went in there and started messing around with it. But obviously, a lot of the times you're not going to go in there. I have yet to see help desk required to take apart one of these printers. As for the other things that I've stated, yes, but as for transfer corona or a high voltage power supply, the HVPS itself, they won't send you those things. They usually just ask you to send it to the manufacturer and they'll replace it themselves and or send you another printer. Most of these things have their own self-tests, which let you know exactly what the problem may be. Any questions?
It sounds very dangerous. Is there even an attempt fixing a laser printer?
I wouldn't mess with the HVPS. As for the tonal cartridge, that's usually a one big unit with almost everything in there. So a lot of them have like this humongous cartridge versus some of them only have like one where the toner is and one where the drum is. A lot of them have both the drum and the toner all in one. Next question, if there are no questions in reference to blank pages, obviously what they mean about the power itself, if I don't have enough power, I may create where I'm not able to create the negative 600 or the negative 100 or the positive 600 correctly. It won't create the image correctly. We all agree it has to be at negative 600 so that it's all erased. Then it does the negative 100 to create the image so that when the toner comes in charged at negative 600, it falls and it attracts itself to the negative 100. That's what basically happens at that point. Now when it pushes with the positive 600, it just throws everything that's there off of the drum onto the paper. So if I don't have correct HVPS, that could create a blank page because I don't have the right voltage coming in. Next slide is in reference to all black. Am I reading that correctly? Yeah, all black pages. This obviously happens again when the charging unit, the transfer charging corona itself, or even the toner cartridge malfunctions. Usually the EP drum, if it fails and it's having problems, you need to replace the drum. That's that green, light green thing that I told you. Usually though, a lot of these expensive HP printers bring it all together. In reference to the big, humongous, multifunctional printers, no. They have the big, humongous thing for you to throw the toner in there, and then they have the drums separate. But as for your ones you put on your desk, those small laser jet 4s and stuff like that, those usually is all in one. Because obviously the drum is grounded, it has no charge. Anything with a charge like the toner will stick to it. As the drum rotates, all the toner is transferred to the page and it becomes a big black page. The solution is to replace the toner cartridge usually. And if this isn't it, then the only other thing when you have ruled out everything, although it may not be possible, it has to be it. The HVPS will create that also, obviously. If everything is somehow not getting the right charge, instead of giving me all white, it may just create all black. As for repetitive small marks and defects, I believe we already stated that. That could be one or two things. It could actually be caused by spilled toner. Remember I was talking about shaking it? So if you shake it ridiculously, sometimes these people do, it's some of the toner actually spills out. Or if it's getting defected itself, sometimes the toner starts coming out. It could be the damage or the defective, depending on what happened, and it needs to be replaced. Vertical black lines, right? This can actually be the drum itself that's creating that, or a dirty corona wire itself. Depending of which of the two, the drum typically is part of the actual tonal cartridge, so that's easy to replace and the best solution at first. And obviously if that doesn't fix it and it is the actual the corona or something like that, then that I would strongly recommend speaking to the manufacturer. Image smudging, as we stated several times, the fuser isn't reaching the proper temperature, so something's wrong with it, and that gets to be replaced. Fusers also come as parts, so don't be afraid with them. All these things have their own little compartment that comes with easy either pins or 2 screws to take out. And here's a fuser. But they sell you the fuser kits. These are meant to be worn out. So there's no way you can go to HP and tell them, oh, look, my fuser went bad. I want a brand new one. No. I mean, unless if it was like 2 or 3 days or something like that. Okay, that might be something. But this is meant to be worn out. We all have to agree, and we have to be realistic. You have to purchase this just like your toner. So usually one rule of thumb is when you're replacing something like this, you might well start buying the whole kit, including the one for the rollers. So this one and maybe the rollers, I would do the same time, because if this went bad, obviously the rollers are already getting old. So I might as well replace those two, the pickup rollers. Any questions? The drum, we all agree, I'm replacing that like crazy. Every time I run out of, if it's all in one case, I usually replace that when I'm replacing the toner, the drum. As for ghosting, is what you have when you see little faint image of the previously printed pages. That basically is, again, happens where the cleaning blade is not actually erasing everything, or the lamp itself, when that's supposed to be doing it, is not erasing it, because we know that it goes and it takes off the toner, but there's a lamp that erases the image also from the actual drum. One thing is the toner that she cleans, and the other is the image that's on the drum. The printer prints pages of garbage. This obviously is usually 9 out of 10 times, again, before you go and swap out this printer, check the user's printer drivers. You'll be surprised what they do. They go in there and they change it, and obviously it's talking, every print driver has its own language. So if you're talking to it in French and it only understands English, it's gonna print it all out in God only knows what. It's just gonna print out whatever it can make out of its own language, because it's all zeros and ones. So it's gonna use those zeros and ones, and corresponding to what I understand these zeros and ones means is what I'm gonna print. And care less what you believe you wanted to print, but that's what those zeros and ones represent to me as a printer. Wrong driver, garbage in, garbage out. Obviously, if it's not then that, the only other thing, if we have no other choice, would be the actual firmware board or the board itself on the unit, but that's very rare. Network issues. Next slide. The whole purpose of using network obviously is to help us, but obviously they could be tending to get very upset when it comes to network issues. We may need to make sure that the issue isn't just the printer itself. Is it maybe that the whole area is down? Is the switch down itself? Is the unplugged cable? Maybe the cleaning crews, we had a lot of times where the cleaning crews came and would actually dislodge, because we had an external print server. I'm talking about back in the old days. So it only had an LPT port, and it had an external print server, little box, who then created the print server for it could connect to the network. So they would come and hit the back of the printer while they're sweeping, and unfortunately dislodge the LPT1 port. So we were able to connect to the printer per se, which was actually the print server, but we weren't able to determine remotely what the issue was. Another one that's very famous is that sometimes the little network cable, the head, has a little tip on it, and that goes bad, and then it just easily comes out. So we need to make sure, is it that? It could be also not just the actual device. Any questions or doubts? We got to go back to the basics in network troubleshooting, as we stated before, is the other way around. When I'm checking the network, I go to the physical layer first before I go up the ladder, right? Not going to start at the application layer. I start at the physical layer before I go anywhere else. Go up the ladder. Any questions? Doubts? So no connectivity. If you don't have any lights, right? You don't have any connection, as we stated. The little light in the back is not flickering. Usually it's a bad cable or the card itself has gone bad. We have to be able to determine which is which. If the computer is having problems and it's not everyone else, then obviously we need to then pinpoint the problem within that computer instead of the actual printer. Most wireless cards, though, have an activity light on them. Those are the ones that have the little antenna. So if the printer has a little wireless card with the antenna coming out of it, you'll see a little light flickering. But as for the ones that are internal, don't have a little light. If we're having issues with their own computer, then obviously we can check their NICs. We can go into ipconfig and verify what IP addresses they're having. They have the correct default gateway. We should be able to verify that their IP version 6 and or 4 is correct, depending on what they're using. They don't. If your company is not using internal IP version 6, then obviously just confirm all the settings for IP version 4. Any questions? Continuation with no connectivity. Common refrain from users when they are having network issues. I can't get to anything. As a technician, you need to parse the statement to understand really what's going on and isolate if it's their device, the one that's giving the issue, or if it's the printer. Which device is it? As we stated, there's many devices on the way, and especially if some of these devices are going from one side of the facility to the other, or they're at least going back to a switch. So we need to determine exact. So we need to ask questions to determine which resource is really unavailable to them. The two main categories to be unavailable to resources are usually local resources or the internet itself. So it's their internal LAN, or maybe the intranet or internet is the one that's causing the problem. What would be the variance between the intranet and the internet? Paulo. So I can get to all my servers on the LAN. I can get to the internet, but I can't get to the intranet. That's what the user tells you. Can somebody explain to me? What do they mean? Anyone?
Oh, it means that you can't connect to that device that's within your broadcast.
Well, I'm able to get to my servers on my LAN. I can see him. I can go to google.com, but I can't go to my web server, my company web server. That's what intranet means. It's the internal internet, intranet. So it's all the web servers that are internal to my company. It does not have to reside on my LAN. It can be anywhere within the company's domain.
Okay, got it.
So depending on the actual issue, that's what we need to resolve. Sometimes some of these printers are actually going off of AS400s and other things. Although the printer and the computer is in the same building, the actual print server that they're printing to is not. So that could be another issue with connectivity issues with printers. So we need to rule out what exactly is the problem. If the user is unable to get to local resources, then obviously the odds are that they can't get to anything. They can't get to their server, and they can't ping even the router, and obviously they lose everything. There's no way they're going to be able to get to anything. But as for any other issues, we need to be able to rule it out when it's not in the LAN. What exactly is the problem? You have the physical layer versus any of the other layers that are out there. It could be their network card, it could be their wireless card or wired card. Step by step, we check before we rule out and replace a whole printer just because we can't get to it. Any questions? So what can I do? Well, basically, as any other network issue, I can basically ping printers and or any other device, depending what it is that I'm trying to verify and to check out, right? Ping my local host. If I ping local host, who is local host? What does ping local host mean?
Does that mean you're pinging within your LAN?
Okay. So when you ping with your local host, you're pinging your loopback address. And or your own name. 127.0.0.1. What does that tell me when I ping my local host?
It means your NIC is working?
Correct. So my drivers are good. My NIC is communicating. I'm able to loop back to myself. I can send and receive a packet to myself. That's the first line of defense to verify before I go and ping. Because if you notice, I go and ping this guy here, should give me another IP address. And there he is. 10.0.0.119 is my real network address. This is only my loopback address that only goes to me internal. Any questions? Doubts? Right. Next slide. Command lines of IP config. We have IP config /all. IP config release. There's release 6 or release from the DHCP, renew and renew 6, depending which flavor you want. And you also have flush DNS. What does flush DNS mean?
It means that you're basically getting rid of all the namings you have saved for domain name servers.
Right. So it's going to go and refresh all my tables. Instead of using the cache to resolve, remember cache is our friend so that we don't waste milliseconds looking up information. So what DNS server, as we stated before, his job is basically is to look up names. If he himself does not know, he basically says, and he goes, okay, is this .org, .com, .who? Right. If it's .org, he goes, hey, you, DNS server.org. Need to know who's pepper.org. You come back and you go, here, this is who's registered in my domain of .org. There's DNS server that is basically the domain of each one. So .tv, .com, .edu, every single domain has a master domain server where you can put a little crown on him and pretend he's the king. That's what's dangerous about the DNS servers, as we stated, that they can be spoofed. So if they're spoofed or they are, the table entries are changed, this service is so trustworthy that it will update all of its tables and cache the information. So if we fix the issue, we should then flush our DNS, if we actually fix the issue, that can actually fix then your own issue locally.
So when would you use the flush one?
Well, another reason would be, let's say I replace my server, right? And that server had a specific IP address, but it changed, right? But it's still the same server name, but now I moved it somewhere else. I would want to flush my DNS tables, because now instead of using the current DNS table that I have, it'll refresh and bring down the correct IP. Only purpose is going to do is that. It's just going to clear the cache of all DNS entries and refresh whenever it's needed, obviously. And then you could obviously display its contents, I recall. What is it? Display DNS? Display DNS. And here are all my entries. All the entries of the different locations that he's looked up already. Only purpose of this would be obviously when you're having problems and it's not able to resolve correctly, and then you would actually flush the DNS. The usual one is release and renew. I've used that a lot. The reason I would do release and renew with users a lot of the times is if they're getting a message that says that they have a duplicate IP address in the network. Two, it could be that they got an IP address and the DHCP server was down temporarily, but they haven't received a new IP address. Instead of asking them to restart the computer, I would just ask him to go into the command prompt and do a ipconfig/release and then an ipconfig/renew, and it should with ease release the PIPA address and give them a DHCP address if the DHCP server is back online.
I have a question. Do you have to do release first and then renew? Can't just click renew to tell it to
You have to
replace?
release to be able to renew, yeah. You can't renew without releasing.
Okay, got it.
You can't, in other words, it won't be able to renew a new license. You don't release the license, it has to grab a new one. No, release the IP, sorry. To release the IP to grab a new lease of IP. Because when you're releasing and renewing, you're looking for DHCP IP address. It's not a manual IP at that point. It's completely dynamic. It's not static. Any questions? Okay, traceroute commands. Traceroute commands are very useful in reference to being able to determine when the issue is not inside your actual network. I believe I showed you guys a traceroute before. So if I do a traceroute from here to Google, I can see all the hops that I'm taking. A lot of the times, if these are T1 circuits that are going from one country to another, you'll be able to do a trace route and figure out exactly where in the networks the issue is coming out, because you'll start receiving an issue or a little star where it says that it's unable to get to it. Let's see, traceroute, google.com. So we'll see here where he basically goes, if everybody remembers my IP address was 10 dot something, and anyone want to take a gander who's .1, that should be my router. 96 is that a public or a private IP address? 96.120.
That's a public 96.
Right, so at that point I have a public IP address, but it doesn't mean that I'm completely out in the internet. So notice, it looks like I'm going into the internal backbone of Comcast. I have yet to go out. I'm still in Comcast, not until I get to the 66 over here, because it looked that I actually got out. And then I reached to the other side. And who actually is answering? Is Google answering me?
It looks like a third or second party is answering you, or it is Google, just with a weird name.
A lot
Not
of
Google
times,
directly.
no. A lot of the times, there is servers out there who store these websites to ease the lookup. So instead of going all the way to Google to look this up, looks like that local server there, that 172.2173, is the one that's actually answering. He most likely has stored that information.
Is that considered a proxy server?
I'm not sure what you want to call it, if it's a proxy server per se, because it's not, because it has a site. So I forgot what it is. Load balancing, I guess, is a lack of a better name. It's hosting it for this area. Because I'm pretty sure that, see, look, there's other ones out there. Look, there's a whole farm out there of these. This is, I guess, this would be most likely, if I would call it anything, the load balancer, probably. That's the one that probably gets everything, and then he goes to whatever Google server in the farm is available, he probably routes it out there.
What does it mean by reverse DNS?
Reverse DNS, you gave an IP and you looked up the name.
Oh, okay. So instead of looking up with name, you're looking up with the IP.
Mhm.
So IP to name.
Yeah. Any questions, doubts? All right. So, netstat. That's the next one that we can use for troubleshooting. Netstat, though, command gives me basically my inbound and outbound TCP/IP connections. This doesn't actually tell me anything except for the actual connections that I have created. So if I go netstat -A, for instance, show me all the active ones. This tells me what's the port, and this tells me who's the foreign address and what port I'm connecting to on the other side. Any questions? Doubts? Why would I use this one? We said this one over here will tell me where in the hop I'm having problems. What's the use of this here?
I guess it lets you know what ports are open and closed, where the connections are going in and out from your computer.
Correct. So I can see here, if I'm supposed to be getting connected to a certain server and I'm not establishing a connection, or worse, I see a connection where it shouldn't be, that could obviously help me determine the issues when we're having slow or problems with their connections. It could be that it's maybe a backdoor that's open, some type of virus is installed. So now the person maybe has a keylogger, which is sending all the information out there. This little screen here will let me know exactly locally what's the IP that in my machine and the port that I'm using and the port that they're using. Questions or doubts? You guys are sure? All right. MBT stat. So MBT stat is used for net BIOS. Usually you use this to be able to verify the domain that you're connected to. Here you'll notice that this one's connected to a work group versus if I was connected to an actual Windows domain, it'll tell me the actual domain that I'm in. It'll say the domain. So if it was google.com, it will say Google as being my group instead of work group.
Wait, can you say that again? I couldn't hear you very well.
MBT stat command basically tells me my net BIOS stat. So let me control C here.
What does it mean by net BIOS? Does it literally mean your network's BIOS system?
No,
So what does net bio mean?
net BIOS is a Windows naming. The Windows, yeah, you'll see here. Net BIOS was the old ports, 135 to 138, if you recall. The one where the slammer worm came in. So let's look up the. You guys haven't memorized the ports for net BIOS? The legacy machines, if we recall. Inside the settings, you go in there and you can actually set to turn it on or off.
I know the ports, I'm just not fully sure still what NetBIOS is. I mean, I just have to look it up, I guess.
Let's see here. Okay. Give me a second. So if I want to check, I guess I have to get my computer name. Net file stat minus. Let's get my name. Sorry, give me a second. I need my computer name. I can show you exactly. Okay. Right now, when I did a net BIOS stat, MBT stat on my computer, since I am not connected locally here to any domain, it's unable to see anything because I'm not connected to a domain here. And it goes through each and every card to verify to which domain I'm actually connected through net BIOS. Only computers using net BIOS will have information in here. And as we stated, legacy computer applications are only using this. Legacy means old, 1980s. A lot of these computers nowadays are no longer using net BIOS.
So this is just something to know in case, in a rare chance, they're using such a legacy, right?
You'll be surprised how many companies are still having sunset systems that they should have sunset already. They're not willing to put the money into it.
But
So,
this is so incredibly old.
Mm-hmm.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. It's just a
20
name
years?
resolution. It's a name resolution. It'll tell you exactly what the person's name, the domain that they're in, the name of the computer. So that's the name of the computer and the domain that they're in. If they're in a work group, it'll say work group. If they're in a domain, it'll say the domain that they're in.
So basically, it's like domain. It's like DNS except within your domain, and it's specifically called NetBIOS, which is made from Windows, right?
No, well, Windows was using it for a long time, but other systems use it. It's not only Windows.
Okay, so it's in general. Some systems will use this to find their own name within their own work group or Active Directory, right? Kind of like anything within their own domain.
In their own little work group. You ever done a work group at home?
Yeah.
Or home group? That's what you'll be able to see. The work group that they're in. What a work group are they in? That's all. Nothing major except for that if it is configured, that's how you would check to make sure what the issue is, if it has anything to do with NetBIOS.
40 years old.
Any questions or doubts? You sure? Hello, Juan? All right. All right. So if I want to look at my own machine and I'm not doing it remotely, I do the -N, and you'll notice here that since I am not connected, but this is who I'm registered with. Here's the computer name, here's my group, and here's again the unique name that I'm registered. The 00 and the 20s tell you certain things. Any questions? All right. Command utilities of net commands. Depending on the version of Windows, you have several net commands that you can use. Have any of you ever used these?
Like kinda, but more of like a lab. It's very different from Bash.
Hmm?
It
What?
feels Bash, like Linux command, like feels
Yeah.
very different.
So in net use is to connect to a share. A lot of you might not know that, but instead of having to go into the GUI to map a drive, net use would do that type of command. So you have different net commands or switches that you have available for you. Obviously, you have net accounts, which sets the account password, age, and length on the actual accounts. The net computer adds or deletes computers accounts. Net config is to see the actual network related configurations. Net continue or net pause or net stat, net statistics, and net stop is to control services. So if you want to stop print services, you can look up the name and you could actually create a script which basically stops that service. So if you hit net stop and know exactly what is it that you're looking for, you could actually stop that service on Windows. Question? These are more, obviously, as for administrative commands inside DOS. You have net group and net local group, depending which one, to create and delete and change groups. Net help will give you obviously help towards the actual commands itself. It gives you a little help. As a net help message is to see specific message. Net name is to see the name of the current machine and user. So if I go into DOS and I put net name, oh yeah, I have to put the net name, and I believe I have to put also the computer, right? Yeah, net name, right? That's what it says there. Yeah, net name to get the current machine name or user. Then the next one is net print. This is to interact with print queues or print jobs. Net send will send a message to a certain user. So let's say if the user's ID was AMR1DDC, I can actually hit net send AMR1DDC, and then it'll come out like a little message on their screen. You've probably seen it sometimes that says, oh my gosh, you got to restart your computer now. Well, that's usually net send that's coming out, little background. Yes, it's being done maybe through some other GUI interface, but you could actually do it through DOS. Anything that you can do in the shell command prompt, you can obviously do in a GUI, but usually administrators find themselves inside this black screen a lot of the times. Either this or the new one, which is the PowerShell. We will be discussing the PowerShell, I believe, on the latter, 1002. Any questions or doubts? Everyone understand? All right. NS lookup. NS lookup, I believe I showed you guys this before. This is a name, the DNS name lookup. So if I want to be able to look up and make sure that I am configured correctly, one of the things that I can do is NS lookup. I could also cross domain to DNS servers and change DNS servers if I wish. Obviously, that's usually, if you think that your server is giving you problems, you can actually go to another DNS server and jump on. In here, when you're in here, you can basically do 8.8.8.8, and he'll give you that's DNS.Google, for instance. Or I can ask who's DNS.Google, and it should answer back with a specific IP address. Question. If you notice, when I asked for the name, it gave me all IP addresses, versus when I told it the IP, it gave me the name. All these IPs resolve to this one name. Depending which one's closer, the router or the entry comes back to me of who I should use. The DNS servers know which one's the closest ones to you, so they'll send you to those. Any questions? All right. Finishing up here. Question number one. Which command is used to determine if another computer is reachable via TCP/IP?
Ding ding.
Who, what, where, how? Which one?
Ding.
A?
Thing.
D, as in Delta.
Okay. I got A and D. How many votes for A and how many votes for D?
I vote for D.
For
D.
B? For B as in boy?
As in Delta.
No, D is in Delta.
D is in data force.
Okay, yeah. Ping is the one to be able to determine if another computer is reachable via IP. IP config only gives me my configuration on my computer. Next question. What causes a laser printer to print vertical black lines on documents? Vertical, no, vertical is up and down, sorry.
B, as in boy.
B as in voy. Voy pa la casa. I gotta tell you guys that joke once. Anyway, so yes, there's a scratch on the EP drum. Everyone agree? For laser printers, if I have vertical lines? Next question, what device in a laser printer provides voltages to the corona wires?
I would assume A. No.
Who's gonna give voltage?
D, high voltage power supply.
Okay. We agree, HVPS?
I agree.
Yes.
Next one. While troubleshooting a client computer, you decide to obtain a new IP address from the DHCP server. After releasing existing address, which command do you use to get a new IP from the DHCP server?
B, as in boy.
Okay, I got B. Everybody agree? IP config / renew?
I agree.
Yes, renew. After I release, I must renew. There is no such thing as refresh. All right, next one. Number 5, the display on your laptop appears warped and fuzzy. You plug in an external monitor and the image looks fine. What is the most likely cause for the problem? Come on, guys.
B as in boy.
Yeah.
B as in boy, the LCD display, right? Because it can't be the card. The card seems to be working fine. If I put an external monitor, it's the same card, they're just plugging in an external monitor.
I get it. Because it can't be any of the internal components providing the video if it's still fine on another monitor.
Yeah, it's just saying that the laptop, on the laptop screen, my screen here, but as soon as I put the monitor on, there's no problem.
Okay.
So it's still one video card, right?
Right.
All right. Any
Understood.
questions or doubts? Okay. That's pretty much all we have in what she wrote for today. Don't think we have much after this. Obviously, we have plenty of labs going on for this week, as usual.